Awesome. All right. So thank you guys so much for coming. I know for me it's a privilege, like truly to be able to do this. And I'm so excited to be able to tag along with Terry. Terry's like, I don't want I know, yeah, but we're tagging along with Terry. Because I mean this is phenomenal. So why don't we grab our books? Because it is a big book study. And as Terry, what do you always say about bringing your books? Huh? You gotta
Yeah, bring your books to class.
bring your books to class. All right, so let's open it up and let's kick off with the title page, the very, very first page in the book. And the very first thing it says is Alcoholics Anonymous. So, yeah, what page are we on? Yeah, I don't know. And to be fair, if you came to my big book, like not mine, but the big book study I do on Mondays, man, we were in the middle of the book, partway through the title page. Well, that happened this week. Stick around, find out. All right, so we're going to kick it off, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to stop and talk about that for a minute. And I'll pop over to Terry if you want to say anything. But the first thing that I want to start with is Alcoholics Anonymous, and that is the title of this book. Now we call it a big book. That's its little nickname. In the first edition, it was a lot bigger than this. We used the thick paper, so the drunks we'd be thinking we're getting a good deal with it. But the name of this book is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to point out early on why that is important. The reason that it is important that the title of this book is Alcoholics Anonymous is because the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous, is named after this book, not the other way around. And so this whole fellowship that some of us are a part of has been named after this book. So it kind of tells me that this is probably an important piece of literature. Is there anything you wanted to hop in on for that? Or are you good?
No, I'm good.
All right. So it goes on to say the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. Now, I'm going to jump into some stuff, but did you want to say anything first?
No, you go.
You go, all right.
Okay.
So what I want to kick us off with is it says the story. And what do I have to share here in the rooms of 12 steps is I have to share my story. And my story, what is my story? What are we talking about when I got to share my story? Bill's going to leave early because he's going to share his story. Everyone's going to leave and go listen to Bill. Yeah. But what does it mean when I say that I'm sharing my story? What I'm sharing is my experience with the illness that is defined and outlined in this book. I'm sharing my experience with the solution that is described and outlined in this book, and I'm sharing my experience with the program of action that gets me from that place of hopelessness to that place of hope. So when we talk about I am sharing my story, now listen, I could tell some stories back in the day. Most of them weren't true, but when I talk about sharing my story, what I am sharing is I am sharing my experience. And I want to point that out because Alcoholics Anonymous, this book, these 12 steps, whatever 12-step fellowship you're a part of or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, I truly believe that this is a program of experience. It's not about what I think. It's not about what I know. It's not about what I believe. Goodness gracious, those things got me in trouble before. It is about what I experience as a result of the actions that I take. And when it says how many thousands of men and women, what I want to say is when this was put out into the world, the and women was far more inclusive. It was one woman. And thank goodness for her, because she's like, y'all ain't calling this thing 100 men. I'm not here for that. Absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? But what I want to point out is when we see 100 men and women, that was a hopeful and inclusive statement. And it says, have recovered from alcoholism. Recovered from alcoholism. And if you're writing your book, why wouldn't you? It's a lot of fun. And I hear that's what all the cool kids are doing, writing in your book. Yeah. I mean, no pressure though, but like I hear if you don't write in your book, the people are going to spread rumors about you. You know what? Peer pressure. But this is the very first promise that we see in this book, that we can recover from alcoholism. I feel called to go on a tangent. Before I do you want to pop in and say
Yeah,
anything?
absolutely. Thank you, Thierry. And First off, this is a privilege and an honor to be with you, Paige. We've been trying to kickstart this since January, but we were delayed for a little bit. But we're gonna have some fun today, and yes, the name of the book is Alcoholics Anonymous, and the librarian taught my friend this, and my friend taught me this, is that there's a subtitle right below that, which is the first promise of our big book, which Paige was just talking about, is that we have recovered from alcoholism. So we don't have a cure for alcoholism. Sorry, we don't have a cure for alcohol, but we do have a cure for hopelessness, right? The big book will define a word for you if you allow it to define a word for you. The word recovered means I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. By what? Telling my story. I'm going to tell you my testimony. I'm going to tell you my experience. We're storytellers here, right? I mean, how much? I mean, how wonderful is that? That I go to a place that I don't have to pay. I don't have to pay for treatment or anything like that. And I just get to hear testimonies and stories of people who have been through the ringer like I have and have recovered, who are just like me, drank like me, did more cocaine than I did, blah, blah, blah. They're my twins, but they're sober. And I'm not. And this first promise is going to be, this is the promise that we give to all of you. And then Paige, if you want to go over this circle and triangle, that'd be cool.
Absolutely. I'd love to go over the circle and triangle. And one of the things I want to point out, it's just what Terry said. We do not have a cure for this illness. Whatever brings you to the study, we don't have a cure, but what we have is recovered. Recovered means the insane thought that I have when I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated, that thought is gone. That thought is removed. How did that happen? Well, I wasn't wishing it or hoping, because I wished it hope. It was as the result of the course of action that is outlined in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Real quick. Yeah, I gotta say this. You got your pens out. I wrote this in one of my books, and I highly recommend that you write it down too. We can do it on the blank side on the left. And I wrote, "This is the process that makes me totally dependent upon God in order to live. This is the process that makes me totally dependent upon God in order to live." And I want to give you guys a definition of process. Uh-oh. We're getting into definitions already, Paige.
So excited.
Check this out. I was just reading, what was it, Paige? We're gonna do big book bounce around on the title page already.
There we are.
Where was it at? Where was it? It was in Fred's story. I was just reading it earlier today. Tony Z forced me to speak here. Where is it? Process was expected 42.
Yes.
42, yeah. So the second middle of the page, second paragraph, last sentence. This process, that word process, snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job by myself. Later on down in that last paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines down, it says, but the moment I made up my mind to go through the process, I had that curious feeling that alcoholic condition was relieved. In fact, it proved to be. Here's the definition of process. Let me know if this sounds familiar. A series of actions or steps. Oh, that sounds familiar, right? A series of actions or steps that produces a particular end. And this particular end is what we're going to call the spiritual experience, a personality change, a recovered state of being. So it's a series of actions or steps that produces a particular end. That's all I got there.
Amazing. I could pop back and I could go through Fred, but let's go back to the title page. And what you'll notice is that your title page, if you're North American, you have a North American big book, you're like, hey, there's not a lot of there. There's a little blank spot. Now, if you're one of those fancy alcoholics or fancy drug addicts that's in the UK, I got some people in the UK that are like, I am not fancy, Paige, don't call me that. But in the UK version of this book, Alcoholics Anonymous, what you will see is a symbol, and it is the AA symbol. And it'll be a circle and a triangle. And I am going to do my darndest to see if I can screen share this, because I had a feeling we'd be talking about it.
You can do it. There it is.
Fingers crossed. Knock on wood. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah, the tablet, it's like, ooh, it's getting hot. And so this symbol used to be in the title page of our book. And, just for anyone that's like, hey, that's pretty rad. Why isn't that there anymore? Well, you see, Alcoholics Anonymous, great fellowship, wonderful at sobering up drunks, not so great at copyright law. And that's the joke I always like to make. But the truth of the matter is, when to hold a copyright of a logo or of a symbol, what you have to do is you have to protect that copyright, which that means you have to sue people who use it, which isn't the most in line with our primary purpose. So it just was easier to let it go in North America. But what we have is the circle and the triangle, and it can be really helpful to see what is available on offer in whatever 12-step fellowship you're a part of through this lens of the circle and the triangle. And let's start with the triangle. So at the base of the triangle, I have recovery. And recovery, I want to be very clear, recovery is a spiritual awakening that happens as the result of the 12 steps as outlined in this book. That's what recovery is. And you'll notice that recovery is the base. That's the foundation. And if I don't got that, I got no triangle. That isosceles is isosceling over. That was not, it's a bit obtuse, that problem that I got there. Triangle jokes, just starting strong with triangle jokes. Gonna hypotenuse on my way to the point. And so if I am not fully engaged in these 12 steps, these actions as a way of life, I don't have a foundation. It's going to fall apart. And that's been my experience. So again, recovery, it's these 12 steps as a way of life. So daily prayer, daily meditation, daily inventory, 10 steps, working with others. I have made and I'm making my amends. I have taken my inventory. I've shared it with others. You know what I mean? That's what we're talking about. And so I need that as my foundation. Now, on the right-hand side, we got service. And service is about being of service, having a commitment, having a responsibility. Uh-oh, I don't like that. But having that commitment, showing up, being a member of that home group with a commitment. Maybe there's some ashtrays here. I'm like, oh, I've got ashtrays to clean. You know what I mean? I remember when I got sober, there were some old timers that are like, oh, how do you kids get sober without ashtrays to clean? I didn't bother to say a spiritual awakening is the result of the steps because I didn't know that yet. Now, listen, I didn't want them mad at me. So that is service. And on the other side, what we have is unity. And unity is that connection that we have with others, going to meetings, doing the meeting after the meeting, the Denny's or the virtual Denny's, no affiliation, the connection that we have with others. And what I have found is that if I am equally proportionate in all three sides of the triangle, which is to say I am involved, I have a home group, I'm attending meetings, meetings by themselves will not keep me sober. I have a service commitment. I'm being of service to others. And at base, I'm working these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it. I experience that circle. And that circle is that wholeness, that unity, that connectedness. And I'll pop it over to you if you have stuff you want to triangle.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps out the evil spirits, right? We're in a recovered state when mind, body, and spirit is all interlocked together. It's a way of life. What I want to mention is that it's an equilateral triangle, meaning that all three sides are equal, meaning that, and this is my experience with the triangle, and I highly recommend it if you ever do sit down with someone and you read the big book out loud to them to review this triangle and circle first, because I had no idea that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was the big book, going to meetings, and also having commitment at meetings. I just thought it was going to meetings. I thought I was going to get sober through osmosis by listening to you and going to meetings and feeling better for about an hour or two or that day, and then trying to chase as many meetings as I could possibly go to in order to feel better. And all of a sudden, that ship sailed. I was going to meetings all the time and still hated myself. Still thought about, I was drinking in meetings. I'd go to the bathroom, take a hit of cocaine, and come right back. And I didn't understand that I was treating the body, but I wasn't treating the mind or the spirit part of it. I was doing 1/3 of the program, right? Meaning that I was not treating the foundation part of my triangle, which if there's no foundation, there's no triangle, right? And if I'm not doing the service part, I'm not treating the spirit as well. And what I have in my note, I don't have in my book in front of me, but The recovery portion treats my mind. You could write that down below. And right below that, you could put the first 164 pages of the big book. The steps are the big book. We're going to go, when we get to the table of contents, we'll show you exactly where each step is. It is the book, and it treats the mind. And then you have the unity portion, which is going to meetings. The fellowship, you can put fellowship right above that as well. And it treats the body. Last time I checked, they don't serve alcohol at a meeting. You know? I think they used to. I think in West Virginia, before the traditions were put into place, they actually served beer to people because it wasn't liquor. Yeah, that's a fun fact, right? Think about that, right? So last time I checked, they don't serve alcohol at meetings, so we're sober at an actual AA meeting. Then you have the service point, which treats the spirit, which means I'm carrying the message, right? Which is also the 12 concepts, and the unity portion is the 12 traditions, and then the recovery portion is the 12 steps. I know I kind of went everywhere because I don't have my circle and triangle, but yeah, cool.
No, you did awesome. And I love that you're able to tie that all together. And, Nick picked me up from the airport and he and I were talking about Mark Houston and some, talking about being that hollow bone. And Mark Houston was an incredible, um, member of Alcoholics Anonymous and just a wonderful spiritual man. And he created this thing called Steel on Steel. And I was involved in Steel on Steel groups for a number of years. And man, it took my sobriety to the next level. Not because Steel on Steel is anything special. Steel on Steel just got me to do the stuff that I was supposed to be doing. Let me be quite clear, and helped me with that accountability. But there's a thing in Steel on Steel where you meet together once. We met once a month, and we were to hold each other spiritually accountable. And we would share the struggles that we had living a spiritual way of life. And what it would start with the circle and the triangle, and it would ask, am I proportional? What is my prayer life looking like? My meditation life looking like? Do I got sponsees? What am I doing for my sponsees? Do I got a sponsor? You know what I mean? And then it would get into all those areas of my life. And here's something that I found every single time, is that if I was proportional, if I was involved in the circle and the triangle, Steel on Steel would ask other questions about relationships, family, work, all these other areas. But if I was fully dialed into that, there weren't too many other problems that followed suit. But if I was off whack, or some of the people that I was doing it with were out of whack with some of these things, man, it's funny how all these other areas problems would pile up. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, iron sharpens iron. Right? I did Steel on Steel for a couple years and changed my recovery. If anyone's interested in learning about it, I have a packet and I can introduce you to it. My former sponsor was, his sponsor was Joe Hawk and Mark Houston. So a lot of this stuff comes from them. And as we go through the big book, we could go through the steps. I'll give you stuff that I learned from them and spiritual exercises as well. We're just going to go wherever. We didn't plan anything, right? We did a 2-minute little thing right before here and we'll just go. We're just going to let God demonstrate through us what God could do, period. But right back to the circle and triangle, I really want to emphasize is that not only was that meeting portion, I was doing a lot of it in the beginning because it was necessary, right? And I had a commitment. It was necessary, right? What helped me, it kept me in the game. If you're new here, I would recommend that you get a home, someplace that you call home, that this is my home. I'm gonna go here once a week. I don't matter if it's snow, rain, ice, I'll be there. Zoom, whatever. Say it easier if you're on Zoom, right? But while you're doing that, you're treating your mind by going through the big book with a sponsor who's reading that book out loud to you, is your tour guide, is your your tour guide. But here's another for anyone who has a significant amount of time or multiple years. What has happened is that some people go towards an unproportional triangle with service. Now I'm going to be a service junkie. Who's ever done that? I've done that. Do 1,000 service positions, right? And all of a sudden, what's happening? I'm not really doing the mind part. I'm not really doing the unity portion part. I'm just going to meetings to fulfill my commitment. All right. What about I've done this. What about just doing the 12 steps and not doing the part with the meetings? I did that and not having a service commitment. What's happening is that I'm not in a recovered state of being. I'm telling you right now, don't knock the fellowship. Don't knock the service part of it. It's going to carry you through. when bad times are going to arrive, right? Sometimes the 12 steps can't treat everything that every bad thing that's going to happen to you in your life. Sometimes the fellowship will help you carry you through those times. So I reckon if you have all three sides equal proportional, if you see it that's not equal, just take a look at it. Take a look at it each day. Like, am I really doing this in an equal portions? Is really a way of life? Am I doing too much of this? Am I doing too much of that? Or yeah, it's pretty equal. I feel pretty even. I feel peaceful. I feel useful. I feel comfortable, right? Then you're on the right track. But yeah, I just wanted to chime that in there based on my experience. Because I've gone where I haven't even gone to meetings for a long time, and I'm just doing the 12 steps, talking the book out loud to a lot of people, and that's it. I didn't even have a home group for a minute. Didn't even know what the traditions were, right? If anyone not know the 12 traditions here, just raise your hand. What about the 12 concepts? Right? What's that witchcraft stuff, right? Let me explain a lot of things. There's a book called AA Comes of Age. I highly recommend that you check it out. It's going to talk about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's going to talk about all three parts of the triangle, right? Bill's story is an exact, more intensive look at his story. And then the second part of it is the traditions, and it talks about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous and all the mistakes that we have done in the past and how we are not to repeat these mistakes. There's a reason why Paige and I and everyone here sitting here in these little Hollywood Zoom squares is because there's cats in the background that are carrying out the traditions and talking to each other one-on-one about it and explaining why we have these traditions in place, right? People are going to violate it. I do it. I mean, I've done it all the time. Cursing was one of them. Who cursed a lot? I mean, I speak constantly. I used to curse all the time in the beginning of recovery. You know what that does? That could offend someone, right? And I could be creating disunity in a meeting by cursing. And I didn't know that until someone pulled me aside and explained to me that, hey, this might offset someone. And then, yes, you are diverting from your primary purpose and you're talking blah, blah, blah. And people are taking it the wrong way. So I just wanted to chime on in there. If I highly recommend that you get the service manual of AA and get in depth into it. Find someone who has a working knowledge of the traditions and concepts. Get it all three sides of that triangle. I'll tell you right now, the people that I hang out with, or people that I roll with, or people my road dogs like Paige, right? These people, straight up, these people are entrenched in all three sides of the triangle. They're in smack dead in the middle, right? They're in the game. Like we're all on the same team, but who's in the game? Like I'm in the game, right? And we're going to talk about permanent recovery pretty soon, right? So yeah, that's all I got. Then I think
All good. Put me in, coach. I'm at EA Sports in the game. 12-step recovery. I'm in the game. All right. Did you want to do the contents, or are you good to pop over to Foreword or to the preface? Up to you.
yeah, let's do the contents.
Yeah.
I really want to do that.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
so,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. You go. Rock paper scissors shoot. Who goes first?
All right. It's on you. It's on you.
Okay. So, looking at our table of contents, key. Some people don't even understand what this book is about. I literally thought the big book was way too big. I'm like, screw that thing. But I had no idea that someone actually showed me the table of contents and showed me that they are the steps. The book is the steps. This is an instructional manual. They call it a basic text, right? So the preface, our forward to the first, forward to the second, forward to the third, forward to the fourth is all history of Alcoholics Anonymous and how we've mushroomed from the flying blind period to millions of people. I highly recommend that you read it. Take a second to go over it. If you don't understand it, Google. Google's got everything, man. Google something that you don't quite understand, like the Rockefeller meeting. That's pretty cool. What's up with the Rockefeller? AA was intertwined with the Rockefellers. What happened at that dining, what is it, a dining table or dining room ball or whatever it was called? Check it out. Then you have the doctor's opinion. Doctor's opinion is associated with step one, right? Actually, used to be page one in the what is it called? The first edition of AA. Actually, our first edition was a big red book. I think Paige was just talking about. They made it huge, right? Kind of looked like a Bible, right? Like you're getting your money's worth for it, right? Then you got Bill's story. Bill's story also associated with step one, but also he goes through the entire program of Alcoholics Anonymous from page 13 all the way to 16. He actually goes through the circle and triangle on those pages, which we will do together as a group. Then you have There Is a Solution, also associated with step one. But you also, it's a chapter that's called There's a Solution. So there's step two in there as well. Right? Then you have more about alcoholism, also associated with step one. So you have 4 chapters that are designed to smash the shit out of you with step one. Step one is designed to kick your ass. That's what it's meant to do. To set you up to this point where we have 3 current ideas that, yeah, I'm possibly, maybe not. Yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I'm convinced. How am I? There's no actual way you could take step 1 or 2. That's all experiential stuff, right? I can't teach you pain. I can't teach you willingness. I can't teach you to possibly believe that there's something out there, right? That's all experiential, right? And those 4 chapters are set up to give you. It's basically it's a book of mirrors, a page of mirrors to see me. Oh, that's, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I had a strange mental blank. Yeah, that's me, right? And then it will create a willingness in you to do the second step, right? And then the third step and fourth, right? Then you have We Agnostics dedicated to step 2. That's our prescription, everyone. That's our solution. Then you have How It Works that has step 3 and step 4. Then you have That's How to Get in Touch with This Solution, right? And then you have chapter 6, Into Action. Here's the good one. You got 7 steps and into action. There's a lot of like pew, 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 fire at it, right? You have step 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. You have 7 steps in just this chapter alone. Then you have chapter 7, Working with Others, right? This is how to refill this prescription, right? That is also step 12. But check this out. These are my favorite chapters in the Big Book page. Chapter 8, chapter 2 Wives, also associated with what? Step 12. What about the family afterwards? Also associated with step 12. Chapter 9, the family, I just said that. Chapter 10, 2 Employers, also associated with step 12. And then you have chapter 11, A Vision for You, also associated with step 12 and how to demonstrate these principles in our fellowship. So the book is the first 164 pages. I believe, I don't know, Paige, if you have the exact quotes from the 3rd edition, that this is the basic text or something. The first 164 pages of this volume is the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. The book is the message. So if you want to carry this message, actually carry this book to an actual meeting. Pew, pew, pew. That's all I got.
Absolutely. And just to kind of add to what you're saying about the table of contents, I found the preface and the forewords also a great dive in, and we'll dive into that here in a little bit about why we go through this book. So yes, the history and yes, the growth, but also why would I go through this thing? Why would I want it line by line? Why would I want to hang out with Thierry and Paige? Well, that's a whole separate issue. But why would I want to go through this book? You know what I'm saying? And then one of the things you'll notice, as Thierry was talking about, we got these chapters to smash that delusion that I have, that I'm not like you, that I don't have this thing. But then you'll notice the momentum at which we start rocking and rolling and we start going. You know what I'm saying? Right? And what does that tell me? That tells me it does not take long to get well. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening. I'm meant to pick up some momentum. And then it goes on into the personal stories. And as we cover the preface, we'll kind of talk about like what's changed, what hasn't changed, and the stories there. And so feel like popping over to the preface? Like a roll?
Yeah, sorry, I was texting someone back.
You're all good.
I'll put my email in the chat. So if you want information on Steel, just send me an email, just say, hey, because I'm on my phone right now. It's a little difficult to copy and paste everything. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we are both doing the best we can on different devices that we're not normally on. So thanks for being patient with us. Pew, pew. All right, let's dive into the preface. And I remember I was working with a sponsee one time who was like, actually, it's pronounced preface. And I wanted to say, I can assure you it is not. But preface or preface, however you pronounce it, let's dive on in. And so it says, this is the 4th edition of the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So what I want to point out is the title, again, the title of this book is Alcoholics Anonymous. The fellowship is named after the book. It goes on to say the 1st edition appeared in April 1939, and in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. Now you can make a little note of those 300,000 copies, because when we get to the 2nd edition, we're going to do some math. Yay! Everyone's like, I'm going to leave. Please don't. We're going to do some math. And I will do the math. I won't even make Terry do it. I will do the math. I've done the math before. No one's, although we can write some inventory on me about doing all the triangle things. I'm like, I think it'd be collateral has 90-degree angles on each any who focus, you know? So come for the hopeless dilemma, stay for the math. You're like, I'm out. So 300,000 copies went into circulation. So it says the 2nd edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The 3rd edition, which came off the press in 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19.5-ish million in all formats. Is there anything you want to say about that, or keep rocking and rolling?
Keep rolling. Almost
Right.
a year.
Absolutely. Because this book has become the basic text for our society. So to stop in the middle of the sentence, because that's how I do, what I want to emphasize is that this is a textbook. So it's, I like to joke, it's not a trashy romance novel, although if you get into some of the AA history, oh, there is some hot goss. You know what I mean? You can sit and read about that on the beach. Woo! But this is a textbook. Now, again, if you're like, girl, you lost me at isosceles, I'm not interested in textbooks. Bear with me just 1 second. Of course, a textbook is one that is meant to be learned from, that is meant to be studied. I'm not meant to read it once and then put it away. I'm meant to have an experience with it. And that's what I want to emphasize. Imagine this book was a book that we got in chemistry class in school. And some of you guys are like, please do not give me high school flashbacks. I'm not ready to relive those years. Or maybe some of you are like, oh, that was before the consequences kicked in. Take me back. But if you remember in chemistry class, you would be given some information about the subject matter. And so this textbook is going to give us some information about the subject matter, about what it means to have this illness that is defined in this book. So I got to get that information. Now, again, a chemistry textbook, I'm also going to be given some experiments. And in those experiments, it's going to give me directions on how to run them. And some of you guys might remember back in chemistry class not being jazzercised to do, your homework, or jazzercised to show up. But what I want to point out is I don't have to be excited to do the homework. I don't have to want to do the homework. I don't have to like the homework. I don't have to think the homework could possibly help somebody like me. But if I follow the directions as outlined in that experiment, I will get the result. And if I don't follow the directions that are outlined in the experiment, I'm not getting that. You know what I mean? I'm going to get an F on my final. And that's what it's like here in 12 steps. I don't have to show up with good motives. I don't have to show up without fear. I don't have to show up. I got to show up with a bit of willingness, but I don't have to be over brimming with willingness. We can build momentum on that. But if I run these 12 steps as an experiment, I will get the results. And that is something that happens again and again and again. And if I do not take these steps as outlined in this book, my experience is I do not get the result. So that's kind of what we're talking about here when we're talking about textbook. I'm after an experience. And again, Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study, it is experiential. I'm not after an idea. There's not an A+ on the exam. What I'm after is an experience. So, because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. What are we talking about? Well, one is we don't want to change what's known as the first 164 pages. We're not jazzed about that. Now, there's a couple reasons. One is, as an alcoholic, as an addict, I'm not jazzed about change. You know, there's that old joke, what's the one thing an alcoholic or a drug addict can't stand? Well, it's things exactly as they are in this moment, but also change. Throw myself into a no-win position, don't I? And so we're like not fans of change, except if it's our idea. Then we got a little let me tinker with this thing, which is part of why we're like, hey. But the reason we don't want to change it is because it works. It works. The directions on how to get well work. If I follow them, I get well. And we see that again and again and again. And this experiment is replicable. It works. So we're like, hey, we don't want any radical changes in the 164 pages, essentially. And it says, therefore, the first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program, the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Cocaine Anonymous, the program of a 12-step fellowship of these 12 steps. These 12 steps taken out of this book. So that has been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the second, third, and fourth edition. The section called Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor. And Dr. Silkworth, he gave us knowledge of what our illness is, what our problem is. And I just feel called to tell us right now, you know, just the ADHD that I don't have. What I want to point out is Dr. William D. Silkworth was able to understand that I have an allergy of the body. That once I take, and for me, it's anything mind altering, you know, I take a drink, I take a drug, you know, feel good, do it till I've ruined my life. You know what I mean? I take a drink, it sets off in me and I need more. And the more that I drink or use, the more that I need to use. And he was able to say, yeah, people like Paige, they got this allergy. He didn't know me, but I do call him my homie, Dr. Silkworth. I do that with all of the like history guys. I'm like, my buddy. And everyone's like, Paige. I'm like, yeah, my friends. But he also was able to point out that somebody like me has an obsession of the mind. I have a thought that happens when I am as sober as I am today that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink, first drug, first compulsive, whatever brings you to this study, despite the fact that I know it is destroying my life. So he's going to give us a tremendous amount of useful step one information on how to diagnose the problem that I have. Did you want to say anything about that paragraph, Thierry?
No, I mean, you hit the points. I mean, this volume is this book. So what is the AA recovery program? This book. Yeah. I'm enjoying listening to you. So keep going.
It's lovely. It'll just be the two of us be like, no, I want to hear what you have to say. No, I want to hear what you have to say. It's if you're wondering what that is called, that is a Canadian standoff. And he's not Canadian. So look at the program working in his life. Oh, yeah. So it says the second edition. So that is what has not changed. But here is what has changed. It says the second edition added the appendices, the 12 traditions, because we had to come up with some spiritual principles for all of us to get along, because that doesn't happen naturally. And the directions for getting in touch with AA. But the chief change was in the section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. Bill's story, Dr. Bob's nightmare, and one other personal history from the first edition were retained intact. And I'm just going to pause right there, because what we're going to get into is what has changed, and what has changed is the stories. And you'll notice that I'm not a middle-aged white guy. Well, you might not have noticed. That's fine. Your observation skills is not mine to inventory. But what I got here, I was in my early 20s. And if I got here and it was a bunch of middle-aged white dudes named Bill and William and Bob and maybe a Robert and perhaps a Richard or two, that's my dick joke, huh? Richard, see what I did there? I would have been like, man, this thing couldn't work for me. And a lot of it was 80 white dudes and a gal. You know what I mean? That was the original members. So what they did was, as the fellowship grew and changed, they changed the story. You see, this book was meant to go out into the world and carry this message. I might be alone in the world and not know a single other sober soul, another person who has recovered from this illness. But if I get a copy of this book, it's going to say, we hope it contains all that you need to recover. And that's why we changed the stories. And that's the thrust of what we're beginning to get into. So 3 of these, and I'm going to start reading really quickly because I read this part really quickly. So if you're like, wait, what was that? Just bear with me. So it says, so Bill's story, Dr. Bob's Nightmare, one other history from the first edition were retained intact. 3 were edited, and one of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the story section was divided into 3 parts under the same headings that are used now. In the 3rd edition, part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 of the stories in part 2, they stopped in time, were carried over from the 2nd edition. 8 new stories were added. In part 3, they lost nearly all. 8 stories were retained and 5 new ones were added. And I just want to pause there and talk about the 3 sections of story. Because I don't know about you, but when I came to the rooms at 12-step, I did this thing. And so you guys know what I'm about to say. And it's this thing that you lovely, wonderful lunatics at the Lunacy Commission would ever do. You guys are lovely and wonderful and spiritual giants and would never do this. But it's a thing that I would do. And it's called judging the speaker. You know what I mean? And I would hear some jerk like me natter on, and I think like, whoa, I'm not as bad as her. Right? And then the next person, literally the next person would share. I'd be like, whoa, I'm way worse than that guy. And I was looking for all the ways I didn't fit and all the ways I didn't belong. And look at this section. So we have Pioneers of AA, some of these historical people, but they stopped in time. For me that thinks I'm not as bad, I don't belong, I'm not like you. But also they lost nearly all for people like me that thinks, man, I'm way worse than you. This thing couldn't help me. I just want to point that out. What we're trying to do with this story is to cut through that delusion. And it's a reminder that that's what I meant to try to do with my story, to be properly armed with facts about myself, this illness, this solution, and the process of recovery is outlined in this book. And to do so in such a way that you're like, maybe me too. Shoot, that silly little ginger. You probably use stronger words, but I'm gonna watch my language. Silly little ginger, we'll rock and roll with that one. So, and it says the 4th edition includes 12 concepts for world service. Again, the fellowship begins to grow, and we need additional principles to help guide us so that we can live and function and continue to be all right. And so it revises 3 section of personal stories as follows. 1, new story has been added to part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 of the stories have been deleted. 6 of the story, I'm holding up 7. Some of you guys saw that it was 7, and I'm like, it's 6. I'm sorry, don't listen to the words, not my fingers. I'm just crazy here. 6 of the stories in part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed in addition to the 2 that were transferred to part 1. So what are we saying? The stories have changed. And there's a book, and it is called Experience, Strength, and Hope. And normally I pride myself on being like really good about making sure I bring the book so I can show it to you. But I'm in a different city, and I traveled with a budget airline, and I could not, I had to pack real light, you guys. So I wasn't able to bring that book just to show it with you. But it exists. You can look it up. And so if you're one of those people that are like, oh, what's one of those 8 stories that were removed? I'd love to find out. You know,
and Paige, I don't have a different book here. This is a book that I'm using, but there is a in the beginning pages, I don't know where it is because I don't have it in front of me, but it also says other books, right? And I highly recommend that you check them out. There's Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. Wonderful, wonderful read. A Comes of Age. We talked about that. I think was it the prisons one as well. A wonderful, wonderful literature. I highly recommend that everyone get. Thank you.
Awesome. Absolutely. All right. So last paragraph of the preface. Preface, if you're feeling funky. All changes made over the years in the big book. AA members' fond nickname for this volume have had the same purpose: to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately and thereby to reach more alcoholics. So the stories have changed so that I could think, yes, somebody like me. And it says, if you have a drinking problem, or whatever brings you in this case to this all-inclusive study, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or more important, yes, I felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, this is our first instruction in the big book. It's literally the first instruction, and it's telling us to read one of the 42 personal stories in the big book. So if you want to go through the big book with us, you read one of the stories. And there's a bunch of good ones. I mean, Keys to the Kingdom is one of my favorite ones. A lot of people like Acceptance Was the Answer. I mean, check them out. And you ask yourself these three questions. Now, what I've done is I was taught to take statements and turn them into questions or considerations. And here are some questions for us. And so if you have a drinking problem, put a question mark after that and put, do I have a drinking problem? Okay, yes, I do have a drinking problem. We hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories. That's our instruction. Here's a question for us. Yes, that has happened to me. But did that happen to me? Question mark. As you're reading through one of the stories, one of the 42 personal stories, ask yourself, yeah, that happened to me. Number two, yes, I felt like that. But did I feel like that? That's a statement turned into a question. And here's the third one. Yes, I believe that this program will work for me too. Do I believe that this program for work for me too? Why do I take statements and turn them into questions? Because I could read this book like a romance novel all day. It's a piece of fiction if I do that. We're reading this as a basic text. We're taking this book and we're making it come alive and start talking to you personally. That's why we're going to do that. And I'll show you that as we go throughout the big book.
Awesome. Let's dive into the foreword to the first edition. So this is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. It says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to say something not super controversial, just a little, because I still need y'all to like me. You see that the original we is referring to the first 180 dudes. But what I've come to believe is that the more of us that do the directions as outlined in this book, follow these directions and get the result, the more of us that are included in the we. Of course, they meant it as the first 80 dudes and Florence, those guys. But I believe, like, man, I have become a part of the we. And if those of us who follow these directions, we get to be a part of the we, because it's not just their experience, it's my experience. And if you disagree with that, you're right and I'm wrong. And I always like to say, come join me being wrong, though. It's fun over here. Like, I have a great time. Technically incorrect. Woo! So we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women. Again, the and women was a hopeful and inclusive statement in 1939, because there was one gal at the time and she didn't make it. And they were hoping that this program could work for women. And it says, who have recovered. And I want to emphasize recovered. Recovered does not mean cured. Recovered means the obsession that I have to take that first drink, to take that first drug, to take that first compulsive, whatever brings you to this study is removed as the result of this course of action. Recovered. That is the hope that is on offer. Recovered. And it says from a seemingly hopeful. And I always want to emphasize hopeless, because that's what we're trying to do in step one. We're trying to cut through the delusion to see the reality of my predicament. And if I have the illness as it's laid out in this book, I have a hopeless condition, so a seeming hopeless state of mind and body. When we talk about the seeming, or did you want to, I was going to do mind and body, but if you want to dive in.
No, you go. I was just saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Now, what does it mean to have a seemingly hopeless state of body? Let me tell you from my experience. From my experience, I take a drink, I take a drug, and there's that thing inside of me. Well, the first thing that happens to me, and this is not the hopeless part, this is what I'm like, this was what the hope I was after. It was this. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm okay. I can breathe, ease, comfort. But you see, I get that even if it's just a millisecond. It's like a thing that goes, I'm not at home. I don't got a light switch here. But when I'm at home, I got a light switch. A little switch goes off in the back of my head and it tells me more. And the more I drink or use, the more I need to drink or use. See, I need that next drink, that next hit, that next shoot, that next high, far more than I needed that first. You know, I take a drink and I get thirsty. You see, what happens to me is more often than not, I take that drink, that allergy sets off, and I can't control the amount that I take. And what happens is when I drink or use, I cross these lines in the sand. You know what I mean? These lines in the sand that I said I would never cross. Things start to happen to me that I never wanted to have happen to me. I start to do things to others that I never wanted to do to others. I start to lose things. And I'm not just talking about car keys. I'm not just talking about jobs. I'm beginning to talk about relationships. I'm beginning to talk about trust. I'm beginning to talk about dignity. I'm beginning to talk about hopes and dreams and self-respect and the will to live. See, I start losing these things because I can't control the amount that I take. Now, that's only a part of the hopelessness. Because what happens is I say, I'm never going to do it again. And you see, I also have the seemingly hopeless state of mind. And that is the mental obsession. See, I burn it to the ground. I come to the next day fueled with guilt and shame and remorse, and I hate myself. I hate what I've done. I hate who I've become. Man, I can't stand myself anymore. I don't want to do it again, but a day, a week, a month later, I get a thought that says this time will be different. A thought that says nobody will ever know. A thought that says just 3 drinks or just 3 days. Or, you know, it's a thought that's on me and on me and on me till I take that drink or take that drug. Or I get a case of the suddenlies. I'm out there living my life. I got a drink in hand. I got a crack pipe in mouth, and I don't know how it happened. I got a case of the suddenlies. You see, what makes that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body is I can't control the amount that I take, but I'm doomed to take that first one. I will drink again. I will use again. That is the mental obsession. Do you want to hop in on that?
Yeah, that hopeless state, right, means I can't stay stopped, both mind and body. And this is giving us the definition recovered. We recovered from hopelessness. That's what it means, right? And we're not going to tell you how we did it. We're going to show you, right, Paige? Right? To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered. See those squiggly lines? I mean, so back in the 30s, it was, I guess you had to pay more to put italics in. So all the words are, anything that's in black and written in this book is pretty important. But when they squiggle the lines, it's super duper important. It means pay attention. That's what it means. Precisely, I believe the definition is without, in exact terms without vagueness. So in exact terms without vagueness, how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So this book is going to show you how to recover based on their experience, not by their opinions, based on experiences they never had, based on their experience. And it says, for them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. Put right above authentication, no more drinking is necessary. No more drugging is necessary. We're talking about permanent recovery here. It's a thread throughout the big book. Yes, I do have a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. Yeah, of course. But the basis, we're going to look at the word basis as we go through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It means an underlying support or foundation. The basis of my recovery is I'm done. I'm done for good and forever. We're going to be talking about permanent recovery here. You don't ever have to drink a drug ever again. And these pages will convince us so, right? And they're not going to, like I said, they're not telling us, they're going to show us. So where am I at? We think this account of our experience, not our opinions, will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic or the addict. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, right? Sick person, mind and body and spirit. right? Like me too. Hey, what's up, buddy? Yeah, I'm gonna lock up. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm leaving at 9 o'clock. So I'm gonna leave at 9 o'clock. Yeah. All right, sorry about that. I'm getting kicked out. All right. And besides, we are sure, I like that word sure. We can look at through that through the big book. We could have another thread that our way of living, underline, highlight those 3 words. Way of living, a way of life, a design for living, a level of life. It's going to be another thread that we are going to look at throughout the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Way of living is basically a description of the 4th dimension, which is basically a description of mind, body, spirit, our circle and triangle, all interlocked together. And the result of that is the 4th dimension of an recovered state and has its advantages for all, which includes the family, which includes our employers, which includes our employees, which includes our co-workers, which includes any of the random Joe that you meet on the street, right? The world is a better place because of this way of living that I have adopted. Now, guys, I'm getting kicked out, so I gotta go.
See, Terry, this is not the last time, this is not the first time Terry's been, shut down a place. Am I right? And so I'll just real quick, what I wanted to say, way of living. This is a way of living. It is a way of life. I talk about this is not a set it and forget it deal. This is how I live my life. It is not recovery over here and work and family and this and that. No, recovery. These 12 steps are how I show up to all areas of my life. And I just want to do a shout out for the Davids. The main purpose of this book, that'd be a great name for a big book study, am I right? Yeah. Happening on Wednesdays. And so just in respective time, why don't we leave it there and we'll pick up next week. I'll stop the recording. And those of us who aren't getting kicked out of the clubhouse, we can wrap it up with the Serenity Prayer. So give me a sec, I'll stop the recording.